This week's Torah portion is called Shelach. And the main part of this Torah portion speaks about the 12 spies, the 12 scouts that the Jewish people sent into the land of Israel to go check out the land before they were about to enter in. They were going to see what peoples lived there, what the land looked like, how were they going to take it over. And they come back with a report that puts fear into the people such that they cry. They don't want to go into the land. They were told that there are going to be giants there. They're told that the land consumes its people. And they had so much fear that this whole episode of the scouts coming back with their report and the way it was received, such that the Jewish people don't get to go in for another 40 years. I want to present another commentary on what it was that the spies, what that report was that the spies came back with. It says that one commentary suggests that they didn't want to go into the land of Israel. They wanted to stay in the desert. The desert was an amazing place to be. God was taking care of them. They had clouds of glory that were surrounding them. They had a fire that lit up that showed them the way. They had the divine presence resting on their tabernacle. They had food from heaven. They had water out of a rock. They were taken care of. There was spiritual connection to God. It was like they were like angels in the desert, so to speak. What an amazing place to be so suffused and surrounded by spirituality. And so one of our commentators suggests that the reason why the spies came back with this report was because they didn't want to go back. They didn't want to go into the land. They wanted to stay in this beautiful spiritual oasis in the desert. And yet they should go into the land, right? There's a spiritual destiny of the Jewish people to go into the land. It's a land that God promised us, and the land itself has holiness, and it's a place for us to be. Right after the description of the spies in this week's Torah portion, we read about a mitzvah, a commandment, to remove a piece of the dough off our dough that we make, off our challah. So we talk every week, we say, we're going to have challah for Shabbat meal, but actually the challah is the little piece that we take off, the little piece that we separate. So when you go into the land, says God, and you are going to plant your seeds, and you're going to have to pray for rain, and the rain will come, and your seeds will grow, and you'll harvest, and you'll winnow, and all the things you do to make bread, all that process, recognize that it's not like manna coming out of heaven that's ready for you to eat, but it's still me providing. Me, God, are going to continue to provide for you, but it's going to look different. And you, the Jewish people, have to put your work in. You have to put your effort in. You have to plant the seeds, and you have to, thresh the wheat and all the things that we do to make flour, etc. We have to do all those things. There's going to be an active participation of us. And in that activity, we are given the capacity. This is an amazing concept to contemplate, is that we are given the capacity to infuse holiness in our spiritual world. In the desert, it was given to us. It was passively given to us, the spirituality, the connection to God. Now that we're in this physical world, we have to find it. We have to tease it out. We have to work towards making it. We have to yearn for it and work towards it. So that's what we did. When we took a little piece of that challah and we make a blessing, and we say, we recognize that this bread that we have put our efforts into is also a gift from God. And we give that little piece, we give it to the priest in the temple. Now we don't have priests, so we burn it, we don't eat it, but we still continue to separate. And that piece that we separate is called challah, although we call the whole bread challah. We've made something spiritual out of something physical. This bread is spiritual, and it sustains us physically, and it nourishes us spiritually. So that's the challah. And I want to extend this idea, this thinking, the challah, the chol, and say that there's a movement now going around for women to light Shabbat candles, or whoever lights Shabbat candles, to light Shabbat candles 10 minutes early, right? So there is a time every week where we go from our weekday, and at that time, that exact time, it changes depending on, the season, we're now going to enter into this special holy time of Shabbat. We're going to go from weekday to Shabbat. There's a time in which it switches from weekday to holy day. We can bring in Shabbat early by lighting the candles, by making a blessing, by bringing Shabbat in early. We create more holy space. We take 10 minutes of what otherwise would be a weekday, and we make it Shabbat. And Shabbat is infused with God's holiness. I heard something very interesting from Kabbalistic book that I was reading about how it is that God creates the world in 6 days with speech. And we this is kind of a common teaching that God speaks the world into existence. God said, let there be light, let there be this and that. And the world was created through speech. And on Shabbos, God doesn't speak the world into existence. God thinks the world into existence. So when a person thinks a thought, it's inside of them. It's inside of us. Our thoughts are very intimately connected to who we are, more than our speech. So the saying is, our thoughts are more connected to the thinker than our speech is to the speaker. Our thoughts are inside of us. So if God is creating the world on Shabbat with thought, it means that there's more godliness to be accessed in the world. And if we bring in Shabbat 10 minutes early, we're taking 10 minutes of what otherwise would be a weekday and we're making it into a holy day. We're making it into a special day, a day with more godliness. And we get to do that. We get to take this time entity, this space called time, and make it bigger and bring God into the world more. So we get to do that. So go back to the idea of challah and how we could make our dough holy by taking a piece off, by making a blessing on it, by praying, by giving tzedakah, by giving charity at that time. There's a way to infuse our bread, our dough with spirituality, and so too we can extend the Shabbat holiness into the weekdays by making Shabbat, bringing Shabbat in early, lighting those candles early and saying, this is now Shabbat. This, what otherwise would be a weekday, is now a holy Shabbat energy of God thinking the world into existence and being more connected. And the third idea I want to present is the idea when we spoke earlier about the Jewish people being told that you're going to go into the land of Israel. This is your land to have. And the land itself is spiritual. It is infused with spirituality. There's holiness in the land itself, in the dust, in the sand itself. And one of the ways that we utilize this, I'd like to share with you, is that when we bury a Jewish person outside of the land of Israel, when we bury them in New Jersey or Montreal or wherever you're living, Rhode Island, when you bury a Jewish person in a land outside of Israel, we have bags of sand that come from Israel, and we take that sand and we put it into the coffin with the dead person. We're taking the spiritual cleansing, atoning power that the land of Israel has, and we're bringing it to our dead and we're burying them with it, so that the body that is being put into the land outside of Israel gets the benefit of the land of Israel. That spiritual, holy, atoning process that the land is capable of providing, we provide it for our dead outside of Israel. So all of these ideas are predicated on our capacity to increase the physical world with spirituality. There's spirituality here to be had, and there's a capacity that we have to increase the spirituality that's here, the divine presence that's here. When we light those Shabbos candles 10 minutes early, we're bringing more godliness into the world for that extra 10 minutes. When we separate this little piece off of our dough and we recognize that the dough and everything that came before it, all the planting, all the rain, all the plowing, all that, everything that went into making this bread, is a gift from God. It comes from God. It's not mine. All of it's not mine. I have to share it. That is also creating spirituality, not just in the dough, but in me as I take that bread in. When I eat that bread, I become more spiritually elevated. And finally, to take the sand of Israel, the land of Israel that is infused with holiness, and capturing it and using it for purposes of elevation when we bury people outside of Israel. So I hope that these ideas are ones that we can take with us into our lives as we realize we live a very physical world and we're surrounded by physicality, but to recognize that what our intentions are and what our capacity is to continually every day infuse the physical world with spirituality. And I bless us that we should be successful in that endeavor.